Tonight, shiur nishmat Avi Mori Dober Meber Nuven Halevi Imi Marti Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And this week we have the privilege of reading two different parshiot, Parshat Nitzavim, Parshat Vayaylech. Two of or actually the two shortest parshiot in the Torah in terms of psukim. However, since we're reading them both, it makes one short parsha instead of two short parshiot. We're going to be talking this tonight about a special mitzvah that we have every 7 years, related to, I mean, it's not related to, but the timing is certainly related to Shemitah, and we'll get started in a moment as soon as I get my, here we go. Okay. In the parsha of Vayaylech, we have the mitzvah known as Hakhel, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So let's go first to the psukim. We're in Parshat Vayaylech, Perek Lamed Aleph, Pasuk Zayin, and the parsha really begins by telling us that again Moshe is we're on the last day of Moshe's life. The Torah tells us, and Moshe calls Yoshua. And in the front of all of Am Yisrael, he tells Yoshua Chazak ve'amatz. These two words are going to become Yoshua's trade words. We're going to find them a number of times in Moshe, repeating them to Yoshua. And then in the first chapter of Yoshua, we find Hashem telling Yoshua these same things, Chazak ve'amatz. That is because Yoshua has tough shoes to fill. So Moshe is telling him, you're going to need everything you got to be able to even try to fill these shoes. Not that Moshe he just says, hey, this is not an easy position, no matter who you're following. But remember, Yoshua is in a tough position because he is following Moshe Rabbeinu, and he also has to deal with Am Yisrael, which is itself a tough leadership position. So he's telling him, Chazak ve'amatz, you better be strong, you better hold yourself together. Ki ata tavo et ha'am hazeh, you are the one who will bring this people al haaretz asher nishbah Hashem la'avotam latet lahem, that Hashem has promised the avot to give them. V'ata tanchilena otam, and you will be in charge of apportioning their inheritance to them. So again, it's a full plate, Yoshua. You've got a full job here. Don't think you'll be able to just take it easy and delegate here. Not going to happen. However, in order to make sure that Yoshua knows that he's got somebody's got his back, Hashem, hu ha'olech lefanecha, hu yiyeh imach, lo yarpecha v'lo yazvecha. Hashem is the one who will walk before you. He will be with you. You don't have to. He will not let you become weak, and he will not leave you. Lo tira v'lo techat. Therefore, you have nothing to fear and nothing to be panic-stricken about. Vayichtov Moshe et haTorah hazot. And then, after Moshe is finishing giving Yoshua this chizuk, he writes down the Torah. Whatever this Torah hazot means, I'm not really sure. The parshanim have all kinds of debates as to what happened. There's one midrash that says Moshe wrote a Sefer Torah, a full Sefer Torah, the entire Sefer Torah as we have it on the day of his death. I don't know, unless he took a speed writing course. I have, as a sofer, know it's not so easy to write, a column in one day, much less a whole Sefer Torah in one day. However, Moshe Rabbeinu probably had a little bit of help from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so he was able to get this written pretty quickly. But in any case, Moshe writes something, Vayitna el HaKohanim b'nei Levi, and he hands it to the Kohanim b'nei Levi. By the way, since we know that a Sefer Torah that's missing one letter is not considered kosher, it's masul, so even writing one letter could be considered writing a whole Sefer Torah. So maybe Moshe just did the final, last couple of words in the Torah, and that's what he wrote. Don't know. But whatever he did, he took a Sefer Torah, he gives it to the Kohanim, Hanosim et Aron Brit Hashem, the sons of Levi who are in charge of carrying the Aron Brit Hashem, which, by the way, seems very strange because we find that the entire time the Bnei Yisrael were in the Midbar, who carried the Aron? The Leviim, not the Kohanim. There are only a few times in history where the Kohanim carry the Aron. One of them, of course, is when they crossed the Yarden, which we have very graphically depicted in the opening chapters of the book of Yoshua, where Bnei Yisrael actually crossed the Yarden. And there the Kohanim are to carry the Aron. But in general, the Leviim were the ones who carried the Aron. But anyway, there were Kohanim who are in charge of the Aron. V'el kol ziknei Yisrael, and to all the elders of Israel, he gives the Sefer Torah. Vayitzav Moshe utam lemor, and then Moshe commands them, saying. Now we're going to try to understand who is the them, whether the them is referring to the Kohanim, whether the them is referring to the Kohanim and the Zekanim. Is it referring to the Kohanim, the Zekanim, and Yoshua? Good question. The Parshanim seem to think it's all of the above. But anyway, Moshe commands them with the following statement. Miketz Sheva Shanim, at the end of 7 years, B'moed Shanat Hashmita, at the appointed time of the year of Shemitah, B'chag HaSukkot, during the Sukkot. V'vo Kol Yisrael, when all of Am Yisrael comes, they wrote it, when all of Am Yisrael come to do their pilgrimage to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Chag, b'makom ha'shivchar, to come to the place that Hashem has chosen. At that point in time, actually, it's not the Shemitah year, it's the year after the Shemitah year. But in that time, Tikrat HaTorah Hazot, this Torah should be read, Neged Kol Yisrael V'Aznehem, opposite or against all of Yisrael, into their ears. So all of Yisrael is supposed to hear something being read. It doesn't say who's doing the reading, and it doesn't specifically say what HaTorah Hazot means. But again, we just had this phrase where Moshe wrote something and gave it to them. So whatever it is, perhaps that has something to do with what's going to be read here. What is he supposed to do? Hakhel eta'am, you have to gather all the people together. Anashim, the men, ve'hanashim, and the women, ve'hataf, and the children, ve'gerecha asher b'sharecha, and all the strangers that are in your midst. L'man yishme'u, in order that they should hear. L'man yilmadu, in order that they should learn. V'yaru et Hashem Elokechem, and they will be in awe of Hashem their God. V'shamru lasot, and they will be careful to observe. At Kol Divrei, again, there are those words, HaTorah Hazot. So we have this HaTorah Hazot appears 3 times here, describing a specific body of text, clearly. Now, as I said, whether it's the entire Torah, whether it's a subset of it, good question. Also, interesting thing that we have, you'll notice, I'm going to read one more pasuk and then we'll be finished with the parshiot. V'neihem asher lo yadu, their children who do not know, yishme'u, will hear, v'lamdu, and learn. Liyirat Hashem Elokechem, to be in awe of Hashem, their God, your God. Kol hayamim, all the days, asher atem chayim al ha'adamah, for all of the days that you live on the earth, asher atem ravim et hayardain sham l'rishta, that you are crossing the Yardain to inherit. Now again, you'll notice I've highlighted 2 little phrases in green, Laman Yishme'u, Laman Yilmedu. In Pasuk Yud Beit, where he's talking about gathering the people, everybody's got to be gathered in order that they should hear and in order that they should learn. Question we have to understand is, what does that mean vis-a-vis what it says concerning the children of Nehem Asher Lo Yadu, the children who don't know in Pasuk Yud Gimel, Yishme'u v'lamdu. They have to hear and learn also. Why is this Yishme'u v'lamdu repeated twice? Once for the adults and children, and the other for some other group of children? Good question. But in all of them, they end up with this phrase, Liyirat Hashem or V'yaru et Hashem. The entire purpose of Hakhel, if we look at this chapter here from the way the Torah describes it, is to cause or to bring about within the population an awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we are to be in awe of the Almighty and to understand our relationship with Him. That seems to be the purpose of Hakhel, in order that through the hearing, through the learning, we should approach and have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That seems to be the approach. Now, I just want to digress for a minute, because you'll notice, as I highlighted very clearly, this phrase HaTorah Hazot appears in this context 3 different times. 1, that Moshe writes some kind of Torah. 2 is that the Torah is to be read. And the 3rd is Vishamru Lasot, we're to learn to observe all of the words of the Torah. So I want to do a very quick search through all of the Torah, all the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. How many times do you think the phrase HaTorah Hazot appears in all of the Torah? It's not that frequent an occurrence. By the way, it only appears once throughout the entire Torah where it's not in Sefer Dvarim, but in Sefer Dvarim, this phrase, HaTorah Hazot, appears 15 times throughout Sefer Dvarim. I'm going to very briefly go through them to give us an idea of why the Gemara, when it says what was actually read, it was not all 5 books. It was not the whole Torah from Bereshit up till the end of Zot Bracha. It was selected portions of Sefer Dvarim. And we're going to see why, I suspect, when we go through where this phrase occurs. As I said, the only time that it occurs outside of the book of Dvarim is in the parshiot of Sotah, where it says, Yasalah Kohen et Kol HaTorah Hazot, that the Kohen has to follow this exact precise procedure for the woman who is suspected of adultery. That one, I think, is eliminated. Even though it uses the word HaTorah Hazot, it's not using it in the same way that our parsha is using it. All of the other times that it appears in Sefer Dvarim, it appears to be used in this context of what Moshe is trying to leave as his legacy of this Torah Hazos, this teaching of Moshe that is his legacy, this is unique legacy. So if we look in Parshat Dvarim, it tells us right away, when Moshe starts his speech to Am Yisrael at the beginning of his last 5 weeks of life, at the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Shvat, it says, "Be'ever Yarden," when they're standing in land of Moab, ready to cross into Eretz Yisrael. Moshe's not coming with them. He knows that. He's got a month left to leave his last ethical will and testament to Am Yisrael, and it's his last chance to warn them what's going to happen if they don't live up to their mission. So Ho'il Moshe, but how does the Torah introduce it? It says Ho'il Moshe, Moshe begins by Eretz HaTorah Hazot Lemor. He begins to explain this again, this Torah Hazot, this teaching. So from here, if we look at here, this same phrase HaTorah Hazot seems to imply that Sefer Dvarim is going to form what is part and parcel of what is read in the book of in the ceremony we call Hakhel, when all of Am Yisrael gathers together at the end of the Shemitah year. Similarly, in Parshat Et Chanan, we are told, who is a great nation who has wise, righteous judgments and statutes, like all of this Torah, that I am placing before you today. So again, we have Moshe somehow using this phrase, HaTorah Hazot, this Torah that I'm teaching you, I'm giving you today, seems to be applying, as I said, to what Moshe is teaching them in Sefer Dvarim. Similarly, now in Parshat Shoftim, we have the phrase HaTorah Hazot twice in the context of the law of the king. When the king sits on his throne, when he's appointed to be the king, he has to write a duplicate Sefer Torah. This duplicate has to be with him. He has to read it all his life. Again, what's the reason? Leman Yilmad, in order that he should learn. Now, interestingly enough, here there's no word Lishmoa. We had above it's Leman Yishma'u, Leman Yilmadu. The king is reading it himself. He has to read it. He's supposed to read it himself, not listen to somebody else read it necessarily, although if he doesn't know how to read, he does have to get somebody to read it to him on a regular basis. But again, Leman Yilmad, the purpose is to learn what? Liyirat Hashem Elokav. The same exact phrase that we had above with Hakhel, here applying only to the individual, to the king. Lishmor et kol divrei haTorah hazot et hachukim ha'el hasotam. Because the king, over and above everybody else, has a special law to be, again, to learn the Torah, to study the Torah, to review the Torah, in order that he has to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and realize that even though he's the king, he is the greatest, he has a responsibility to the nation, that the people need to be in awe of him. He has to remember that he's still subservient to God. Very, very important. And again, the same phrase of HaTorah Hazot appearing twice, that the teaching that Moshe is giving to all of Am Yisrael applies double to the king. And that's why we have this phrase again, HaTorah Hazot. Okay. In Parshat Ki Tavo, we have the phrase HaTorah Hazot a number of times. When Bnei Yisrael crossed into Eretz Yisrael, they're crossing the Jordan. One of the ceremonies they're supposed to do is take a bunch of huge boulders, out of the Jordan River, set them up immediately when they cross the Jordan, and write the entire Torah upon them. The Chatavto Aleihem, as we read, and Kol Divrei HaTorah Hazot B'Yavrecha. You're supposed to write this Torah when you cross the Yarden. Again, why? There, the purpose is that you should enter Eretz Yisrael and be successful in Eretz Yisrael and not leave the Torah. You can't say, well, we left the Torah behind. New place, new laws, new everything. No, the Torah comes with us. It is a critical component. When the Jew travels, the Torah comes with him. And if we look and study Jewish history, we will find that those Jewish communities that took the Torah with them and built Torah communities survived, thrived, and continued, and those that left the Torah behind fell by the wayside. Again, you're supposed to write on the stones, not just the Torah, but Ba'er Heitev with a full explanation. Later on, when we are given all of the brachot and klalot on Har Grizim and Har Eval, one of them is Arur Asher. The last one, the ultimate one, is Arur Asher Lo Yakim et Divrei Torah Azot Lasot Otam, and V'yamar Kol Amen. Everybody has to answer Amen again. This concept of Torah Azot, all of these teachings of Sefer Dvarim, as well as all of the other Chumashim, but particularly the teachings here of Sefer Dvarim, have to come with them, because the bulk of the mitzvot that we had in Sefer Dvarim deal primarily with establishing society in Eretz Yisrael, a Torah society that lives on the Torah model, that has institutions set up based on the Torah, based on ethical, moral living according to the Torah, not based on whatever the political winds are blowing. And that's a critical component that Moshe, again, emphasizes, and the Torah emphasizes over and over and over again. And finally, in Parshat Nitzavim, we're still in Parshat Nitzavim, excuse me. In the Tochacha, we are told, in Lo Tishmar Lasot et Kol Divrei HaTorah Azot, what will happen? Gam Kol Chali V'Chol Makar Shelo Katuv B'Sefer HaTorah Azot, all of the problems that aren't written in the Torah, again, will happen. So again, there's a connection to the Torah Hazot, these teachings of Moshe in Sefer Dvarim, as well as all of the Torah, but they are critical to our survival as a people in Eretz Yisrael and thriving in Eretz Yisrael. And finally, in Parshat Nitzavim, we have Anistarot Lashem Elokeinu, Aniglot Lanu V'neinu Alom Asot. Again, at Kol Divrei Torah Azot, we have an obligation to keep all the mitzvot. And at the end of Parshat Vayaylech, in this week's Parshat, it says, Vayichalot no shel Tovet Divrei HaTorah Azot al Sefer ad Tumam. Again, Moshe writes these words of the Torah on the Sefer until they were finished, and finally gives them to Am Yisrael and tells them, Vayom Aleihem, this is what Moshe tells Yoshua at the end of Parshat Hazinu, Simu levavchem l'chol dvarim asher anochi me'id bachem hayom, pay close attention to the words that I'm commanding you today, Asher tzitzavum et b'neichem, that you should command your children, again, lishmar lasot et kol divrei HaTorah hazot. The Moshe is again reminding the people over and over again that all of these mitzvot and all of the Torah is critical for us to survive in Eretz Yisrael. So that was all a digression, just to try to show you the way Moshe is making this point throughout Sefer Dvarim, and that's why I think that when we go through the Gemara, we're going to see that the bulk of what we read was from Sefer Dvarim. Okay, we're going to go back now to Parshat Hakhel, and we're going to look at a Gemara, very interesting Gemara. There's a Gemara in Chagiga that talks about the mitzvah of Hakhel. Tana Rabbanan, we learned the following Braita. Maaseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Elazar ben Chisma, shehalchu la'akbil pnei Yeshua b'Vikiyin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and Rabbi Elazar ben Chisma went to greet their Rebbe, Rabbi Yeshua, in Pekian. That's where he was. Why it was, when it was, doesn't tell us when it was. Just tell us they went to visit the Rebbe. Nice thing to do, right? You go to visit the Rebbe, see what he has to say. Amar Lahem. Now, before they ask him anything, first thing he asks them when they get there is, Mach Kiddush Hayah b'Beit Medrash Hayah. Okay, you guys just came from yeshiva. What did you learn today? Good. That's what any good Rebbe should ask his kids, right? Ask your students. No, what'd you learn today? Amrullah. They answered, wait a minute. Talmidcha anu. We are your students. We drink, literally, we drink from your water. In other words, we can't teach you anything. You're the one who's supposed to be teaching us. Why are you asking us what we learned today? You're the one who's supposed to be teaching us. Amar Lahem, he said, even so, couldn't have spent a whole day in the Beit Midrash and not learn something. You had to pick up something. Now, apparently, again, I don't know when this happened, but Shabbat Shalmi Haita. He asked them the following question: whose Shabbos was it to give the drasha? Now Shabbos could mean Shabbos, although it could mean the week. Okay, so we have to understand that the Gemara, when it asks this question, it's relating us to a different story, where there was a period of time where Rabbi Gamliel was temporarily deposed as the Nasi, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was appointed in his stead because of a machloket that happened among the Chachamim. It's a whole different story in the Gemara Barachot. But it turns out that as a result of that, they went on to a rotation system where, because they couldn't, when they asked Rabbi Gamliel back and reinstated him to his position, they couldn't say, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that's it for you. So they went to a rotation system. So he asked them, whose week was it to give the drashot? Was it Rabbi Gamliel or Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? So they answered Shabbat Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Haita. So it was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's turn to give the drashot this time. And so, okay, so he was the one who gave the drasha. What did he talk about? He asked these students. Remember, this is the Rebbe asking the students. So what did he talk about? Amrullah, but parshiot Hakhel. They said, well, he talked about parshiot Hakhel, which we just read about. Umad Darashba, what was the drasha? What did he say? He said the following. This was the drasha he gave. Hakhel eta'am. The pasuk says that you should gather everybody. Hanashim, the men. Hanashim, the women. Vataf, and the children. So the question that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah asked as he's giving the drushes, Imanashim ba'im lilmod. We understand that the men come to learn. They come to hear and learn. Nashim ba'ot lishmoa. The women come to fulfill the mitzvah of listening. Because again, it says, L'man yishma'u, l'man yilmedu. That some should listen, some should hear, some should learn. Half, lama bain. Why are the children who can't hear, can't learn, they don't know anything? Why are they coming? When it's tough, we're talking about little kids. What are they going to achieve out of coming to this whole thing? And he gives a very interesting answer. He gives, the whole reason the Torah gives a mitzvah for the children to come is so that the parents who bring their children get a reward for bringing the children. Okay? Seems a very strange answer, right? Why? Because, and I think if we go through the Parshanim, I saw this, I don't remember where I saw it. That's the problem, as usual with these Parshanim. Somebody suggests that the reason the Gemara asked this question is because why did the Torah have to command you to bring your children? Who are you going to leave them with? There are no babysitters. You had to bring them anyway. So the whole point is the Torah, by commanding it, is commanding you to do something you would have had to do anyway. If you're coming, you got to come. You got to bring the kids. You can't leave them home alone. So the fact that the Torah gives this command seems very strange because they would have had to bring them anyway. And that's why he says, Taf lama bayim, why do we have to bring? Why does the Torah mention that we have to bring them? To give reward to the people who bring us. The Torah is giving us reward for doing something we would have had to do anyway to fulfill the mitzvah. Very interesting perspective, I think, that tells us that everything that, I think I've emphasized this a little bit past, that everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us in the Torah is not to make our lives miserable. It's not to make our lives something we should complain about. It's to give us zechut. It's to help us out. It's to give us all these beautiful things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have. So I think it's a very interesting perspective on this whole concept of bringing children, specifically so you should get reward for bringing them. Amarlan, by the way, the Rebbe or Yeshua says to him after they have this discussion with him and tell him what they learned. Margolit tovai tabi yadchem. You had this beautiful jewel that you had picked up in the Beit Midrash. And when you didn't want to give it over to me, you wanted me to lose this beautiful jewel. So obviously, Rabbi Yeshua thought this was a very, very important lesson. So, okay, so that's, and by the way, we're going to see that Rashi is going to bring this same thing down a little bit later. Now, the Marsha on this whole Gemara says the following. Okay, firstly, Shabbat Shalmi Haita. Why did it make a difference who gave the drasha? Firstly, the fact that he asked the question this way, they went to a rotation system. As we say in the Gemara in Brachot. Why did he ask this question? What difference did it make who gave the drasha? The point is he wanted to learn what the lesson was, right? Who cares who said it? The Sha'al Cain, and the reason he asked this is to teach us another lesson. Leida mihu bal hagadol. Why did he want to know who was the originator of this lesson? Ki damrinan, as we say in Pirkei Avot, kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro. Anytime you repeat a lesson in the name of the person who taught it, maybe geula li olam. You help bring redemption to the world. And the Pirkei Avot continues, which the Gemara here Marsha doesn't quote. The rest of Pirkei Avot brings a proof of this from Megillat Esther, where Esther tells the king in Mordechai's name about the plot to kill him. And in the end, that becomes a very critical part of the story when the king later on finds out who saves his life and sets Haman up for the end of the road. But again, we have this very important concept that when we teach something, when we teach an important word of Torah, we should try to teach it in the name of whoever we learned it from, which is why oftentimes in the Gemara, you will see 5 lines of Gemara before you even get to what's being said. By it says, Amr so-and-so, b'shem so-and-so, who said it b'shem so-and-so, who said it b'shem this one and that one. So you'll see that often in the Gemara, we will have perhaps a chain of 5 people or 7 people. So-and-so said the name of so-and-so in the name of so-and-so because of this specific mamar of Omer Davar B'Shem Omer Mevi Gula Liola. On a side note, why is it so important to say something, and why does that help bring Geula? I suspect that we have a concept of sifsot dovot to cover. The Gemara establishes this principle, and again, I didn't have a chance to look this Gemara up, so I don't remember off the top of my head where the Gemara is from. But the Gemara says that when we say something in the name of somebody, it's as if that person is speaking, and it's as if that person is alive again, and therefore their merit of this person is joining us and is joined to all of the mitzvot and the learning that we're doing, which helps bring Geula. The more we learn, the more Torah we learn, the more we involve others in our Torah, the more we help bring the Geula closer. Okay. Marsha continues with the following comment. We have this whole concept of we had 2 different psukim. One mentions Taf and the other mentions B'nei your children. So the question is, who is this talking about? Who are these 2 different psukim talking about? What types of children? Which children are included in each of these paragraphs? This seems to imply, your children who didn't know yet are the ones who should be listening and learning, seems to imply that we're including even children who are too young to learn yet. They are coming. No, he says the pasuk of Nehem Asher Lo Yadu is talking about those children who are already at an age where they can accept learning, whether it's 6, 7, whatever that age might be. Therefore, if they're already of an age where they're beginning to learn, then they are the ones who are supposed to be listening. But the others, as we said, and we know, because we know that a katan shegiah lechinuch avid melamdo Torah. Once a child has reached the age where they are able to retain information and can be taught, we have to start teaching them Torah at that age. Basher lo yadu, hainu, what does it mean they don't know yet? They still don't know, or they still haven't learned enough to know exactly what to do in every situation. But when it says the taf, therefore have to be lo yigiu lechinuch. Okay, therefore, when it says taf, these are referring to young children. So when it says that who you're getting reward, the reward you're getting for bringing the young children who aren't even old enough to start learning. We're talking about 1, 2, 3-year-olds. They are the ones who come only to get reward for those who bring them. I suspect, by the way, and I'm going to leave the rest of the Marsha out for now because the rest is just repeating a lot of these, but I suspect that even a 3 or 4 year old who isn't necessarily yet at the age where they can understand the whole reading, especially a public reading where somebody's reading on the top of Bima and there are thousands and literally thousands and thousands of people grouped around. I don't know how loud the voice carried for, but the fact of being in that kind of atmosphere leaves some type of impact, even if you're only 3, 4, 5 years old. And just because you're in this environment that you don't see on an everyday basis, it leaves some type of roshem. I can't think of the English word of remembrance. There's going to be something that's going to sink into your brain just by experiencing this thing. Now, again, if you're already 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, then you'll say, you're already starting to be able to maybe understand what's going on. And obviously, by the time you reach bar mitzvah age and over, you're going to start perhaps already having heard some of this before, so that when it's being read, you're a little bit more familiar with it. Okay, we're going to stop. That's all about the rationale for bringing people of all ages. And now let's go back to the particulars. The particulars said, which seems to imply, if I read that, it would say Shemitah year at the end of the 7 years when it's during Shemitah year of Sukkot of Shemitah year, I should bring it. But it's not. It's the Mikate Sheva Shnim is the end of a 7-year cycle of Shemitah, the following Sukkot. And that's where Rashi says, Bishnat Rishonah Shel Shemitah, Shi B'Shana Shminit. In other words, the whole principle of Hakhel is not during Shemitah year, it's after the end of Shemitah year. That's the following Sukkot, which is the Sukkot of the 8th year. So Rashi says, wait a minute, then why does it say B'moed Shnat HaShmitah? Why does the Torah say it's during the Shemitah year? V'lama koryoto Shnat HaShmitah? Why is this year called the Shemitah year? Shemitah year is over. Shemitah year happened. It's over. Now we're in Sukkot already because Rosh Hashanah. Shemitah goes from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, not from Pesach to Pesach. So if Rosh Hashanah is passed already, the Shemitah is over. It's its 8th year. However, Rashi says the reason it's called Shnat HaShmitah, Shadayin Shvi'it Noheget Ba B'Katzir Shel Shvi'it Hayotzei L'Motzai Shvi'it, because I still cannot harvest crops that grew during the 7th year, even though it's already the 8th year. And we know that for many fruits, Shemitah continues well into the 8th year. As a matter of fact, most of the 8th year. More fruits are affected during the 8th year. Vegetables more in the 7th year. Fruits are affected more in the 8th year than in the 7th year. So therefore, it can still be called Shnat HaShmitah because the laws of Shmitah are still noheg. That's what Rashi wants to explain. Tikva Torah Hazov. Okay, now Rashi is going to give us the particulars of what was read and who read it. Again, from the Gemara. Hamelech hayakor mitfilat ela hadvarim. The king would read from the beginning of Sefer Hadvarim, Kidis of Masechet Sota, as we're going to see later on in a minute. I'm going to quote this Gemara. Al bima shel eitz sheyosim bazara. The king would be standing on a platform, a wooden platform that was built inside the Beit Hamikdash, not in the area near the Karbanot. As Gemara is going to say, we're going to see in a minute in the Ezrat Nashim, the auxiliary part of the Beit Hamikdash, but nonetheless, the king is the one who is reading it, and it is he has a platform to stand on. So I guess maybe that means his voice will carry a little bit further. And Rashi then quotes the Gemara that we just quoted, Nashim lilmod, the men come to learn, Nashim lishma, the women come to hear, Vataf, lamaba, why do the children come? That's what Rashi says again, that was we quoted from the Gemara that we just quoted above. Now let's go back to the Gemara in Sota that gives more particulars about the actual procedure. The Gemara in Sota is the primary case where this mitzvah is discussed, and it's called there. It's called Parshat Hamelech. Interestingly enough, it's called the parsha that the king reads, and that's what it's called in Masechet Sota. And now the Gemara describes the whole procedure. Motzei Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag, the first night of Chol HaMoed Sukkot. So in other words, Yom Tov is day 1. Day 2 of Sukkot, but the night of the second day. In other words, right after you make Havdalah on the first day of Sukkot, Bishmini, during the 8th year, B'motzai Shvi'it, which is the end of the Shemitah year, Osin lo bima shel eitz ba'azara, a wooden platform is made inside the Azara, inside the Beit HaMikdash, Yoshev aleh, and he sits on this bima. The king gets to sit. Shenemar, as it says, Mikate Sheva Shanim B'moed Shnat HaShmitah. Okay. Chazan HaKnesset, the Chazan of the Knesset, who is a official of the procedural of the Kohanim. He notel Sefer Torah. I guess he is the Gabbai, or what we would say would call a Gabbai. Takes the Sefer Torah out of the Aron Kodesh, presumably. The note no Rosh HaKnesset, and he gives it to another dignitary. For Rosh HaKnesset, that's not no Sagan. These are all levels of officials going one level to the higher level, giving it to the higher level. The Rosh HaKnesset gives it to the Sagan, the assistant Kohen Gadol. The Sagan the Kohen Gadol. The assistant Kohen Gadol gives the Sefer Torah to the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol note the Melech. And the Kohen Gadol hands the Sefer Torah to the king. So we have the Chazan, the Rosh Knesset, the Sagan, the Kohen Gadol, and the Melech. So we have 5 different people handing the Sefer Torah off. And this is all to enhance the honor given to the king. We see all these people, all these rising levels of people who are handing the Sefer Torah off to A, to give kavod to the Sefer Torah, but B, to give kavod to the reading itself and to ultimately to the king. Melech Omeid, and ultimately, by the way, not the king, but the king HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the king. The king is in here, is the one who's getting the kavod of this whole procedure. Again, it's supposed to be a ceremony that is full of pomp and circumstances, we would say. But Melech Omeid u'mekabel, this king stands up when they give him the Sefer Torah. But v'korei yoshev, he is allowed to sit down when he reads. He doesn't have to, but he's allowed to. Now the Gemara then quote brings a story. Agrippas HaMelech amad v'kibel v'kara omei. Agrippas, who was a king, or he was the leader of the Jews at the time, shortly before the Churban Bayit Sheni, under the Romans, he stood up, accepted the Torah, and he read standing up, even though he was allowed to sit down. V'shibchu chachamim, and the chachamim praised him for giving extra honor by standing up. However, when he came to the pasuk, you're not allowed to appoint upon yourself ish nachri, a non-Jewish born male. He started crying. Amrulo, they said to him, don't worry, Agrippas, you are our brother. Why was this? Because in his ancestry there were converts who were questionable, and that's a whole different story for a different time. Okay, that's just what they said at that point. Just more brings it in. Now, once he starts reading, what does he do? He reads Mitchilat Eila Hadvarim Ad Shema Yisrael. He reads all of Parshat Dvarim and Parshat V'Chanan, including up to and including Parshat Shema. Then he skips from Shema V'Hayayim Shamoah. He reads the Shema. He reads the V'Hayayim Shamoah. Then he skips from V'Hayayim Shamoah till Aser to Aser. He reads Aser to Aser. He reads Kitchalel Aser, which are in Parshat Re'eh. Then he reads Parshat HaMelech from Shoftim. And then he reads the Brachot Uklalot, which are in Parshat Kitavo. Ad Shegomer Kol HaParsha, until he concludes the entire Parsha of the Brachot and the Klalot. So therefore, we see that most of what he read is all of exhortation. It's Moshe telling us, get your act together. Remember what your obligation as the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael is, and you forget that at your own peril, because again, he reads all of the Brachot Uklalot in Parshat Kitavo. Okay, then after he finishes reading Brachot Kohen Gadol Mevorech Otan HaMelech Mevorech Otan, all of the brachot that were listed before in the Mishnah that Kohen Gadol makes when he reads the Torah on Yom Kippur, the Melech, the king, makes the same exact brachot except for one. Elashenotan shel regalim tachan mechilat ha'avon. Instead of the bracha, which the Kohen Gadol says on Yom Kippur for asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for forgiveness for our sins, which is the theme of Yom Kippur, the king makes bracha that is suitable for Shalosh Regalim, which ends with Mekadesh Yisrael V'Azmanim instead of Mekadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron. So V'Yom HaKippurim, excuse me. So he makes the appropriate bracha for the day. Now again, the Gemara goes into a whole question. Why does the Gemara go into this whole concept of Mikates, Sheva Shanim, V'Moed Hashmita V'Chag Sukkot, and says that it needs all of these to tell us exactly how we get to when it reads it. And we're going to skip the rest of the thing. Okay. Now the Chizkuni again quotes this Gemara and quotes the whole sugya of why it is. What is it we're supposed to read? B'tchilat Hashanah, at the beginning of the 8th year. I'm sorry, at the beginning of the year. L'man yomadu. Why is it read at the beginning of the year? He seems to imply that it's read at the beginning of Shemitah. Why L'man yomadu kol Hashanah? In other words, they should use this entire year as a year of learning. Because remember, what are you doing during Shemitah? You're home. You're on vacation. If you're an agronomist during Shemitah, you don't work. You're home. You don't have to go out there and plow and plant and reap and sow and do all these things you're normally doing. So the man yomadu kol Hashanah, they should spend the whole year learning. Moshe mefaresh v'holech, as it continues. The Chag HaSukkot devo kol Yisrael. Chag HaSukkot. Now Chag HaSukkot is at the beginning of the year. But Moed Shnat HaShmitah. Now he goes back and says no. But Moed Shnat HaShmitah is at the end of the Shemitah year. Me'achar Shana Rishona shel Sheva Shanim shel Shemitah. Lama Yukori Oto Shnat HaShmitah. Again, the same question Rashi asked. If it's the first year, why do we call it the Shemitah year? Tshuva ledavar shadayin din shvit no hegba b'katzir hayotzei mi katzir shvit. So again, he's implying that even during this 8th year, at least during the harvest season, you're not harvesting because all the stuff grew during Shemitah. So at least during that period of time, you should have extra time to learn. Okay, Tikrat Torah Zot. Read this Torah. Who is he talking to that you should read it? LiYoshua Haya Mitzaveh. Tzidkoni wants to say that the command is given to Yoshua as the one who's supposed to read the Torah. And since Yoshua is at this point the Melech, he's the one who's the leader of Yisrael. Therefore, he is telling Yoshua that the mitzvah to read this is the king's mitzvah, whoever the leader of Yisrael is. Why specifically on Sukkot, and why specifically at the end of the year? Hakhel tam shakol pinuyim v'on osef lebayit kalum ki hakol hefker. Specifically in the Sukkot of after the Shemitah year, because everybody has lots of time available. They're not busy running. Oh, I got to go leave. So Yantik's over. I got to go harvest some more crops. There's nothing to harvest. Everybody has equal share, so there's nobody rushing to harvest their crops. That's why specifically this year is chosen. Okay, here we go. Bechor Shor very similarly says the following: why has Sukkot in Sukkot? Because the Sukkot b'Shmitah boim kol Yisrael l'regel. He again, this whole concept of Shnat HaShmitah, that it should be the Shemitah year, because everybody comes to regel during Shemitah year. L'fi she'enam chorshim v'zorim ve'ein lahem peirot b'sadeh lishmor. They haven't harvested. They don't have to plant, because there's nothing in the field to watch over. They can all come to Ola Regel. Whereas in other years, maybe people might not have come to Ola Regel because there was too much produce to leave in the field and it would have all spoiled if they went up to Ola Regel. During this year, they didn't matter because nothing had been harvested. There was nothing to spoil. They don't have to reap. They don't have to collect the crops. The avo kulam shem penuyim. Everybody will come that year because they're all open. They don't have anything to do. The Yishmo et Torah, and they will renew and listen to the Torah and have it renewed. Again, he says the same thing that we had from Chizkuni, Yoshua Hayam Mitzaveh, that this reading is to be Yoshua, Lakach HaMelech Korea, so that's why the king becomes the one who's in charge of reading it. Now, very interesting. Tikwad Torah Zot Neged Kol Yisrael Bi Aznehem, in their ears. Has to go into their ears. Why does the Torah add Bi Aznehem? You're reading it, obviously, they're going. How else are they going to listen? Not going to listen through their nose and through their eyes. What is this concept of bi'aznehem? What does bi'aznehem mean? Kriya hanishmat li'oznaim. It has to be a reading that people will want to listen to. Shehe meforesh umetargem otai. He has to not just read the words and zoom through them so nobody understands them. He has to read it clearly and explain them. If they don't speak Hebrew, he's got to read it in a language that they understand by tape, so everybody understands what is being read. It is a critical component. This is not just a reading for the sake of reading. It's a reading for the sake of learning. Therefore, you have to read it and teach it in a language that people understand. Okay. Who are these children who are coming? First, he wants to say Taf Korei Lefi Shapshat Bnei Arba Esrei Ben Chamesh Esrei, saying Taf is children between the ages of 4 or 14, 5, 15, somewhere around that, 5, 10. At the age of 4, they understand what they said, but they're not 20 yet. They haven't really reached their full adult maturity. They understand it as kids. So he's saying even teenagers here are considered tough. Tough Korelam. Even though they're already age of bar mitzvah, he still calls them tough, still calls them little children. Rabotenu Pirshu, however, the Chachamim explains Katanim. Who does it mean? Katanim afilu barisa mevim. Even children who are still in their carriages, even children who can't walk on their own, got to bring them. The litain schalim mevim, as we saw before, the people who bring them get reward for bringing them. Now, why does it say v'nehem, your children asher lo yodu, who did not know? What didn't they know? Lo ra'u hanisim v'niflaot asher asa kadosh baruch hu imachem. Your children who did not grow up in Mitzrayim or who did not live in the Midbar, who are going to be born in later generations, will not have witnessed all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for Am Yisrael when he brought them into Eretz Yisrael, when he got them through the Midbar. Yilmadu mitoch ha'kriyah halazu. From this reading and from this learning, they'll be able to understand and start to begin to realize all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done for Am Yisrael. Okay, I'll make davar. The Nitziv has the following comments to make, and I thought this was very interesting. Vayitzav, it says at the beginning, Vayitzav Moshe Otam Lemor. What does it mean, Vayitzav Moshe? Moshe commands them, saying that this is the mitzvah. Why did you say that? Hashem, this is the mitzvah. Hakhel Otam. Why do we need this word Vayitzav Moshe? What is Vayitzav? He says is Lashon Ziruz. A Lashon of you have to be rushed to do it. You have to be willing to do it, you have to put your energy into it. The mitzvah hakel koshel lehakim, to get the preparations made for hakel is not so easy. It's a tough challenge. Asfu im hanashim bi'atav shebechol Eretz Yisrael Yerushalayim. Excuse me. That all of the people, everybody, the women, and all of the children, and they're in all of Eretz Yisrael, descend en masse to Yerushalayim. That's a pretty tall order to get everybody in there. It's going to be lots going on. So it's not an easy thing when you got to put all these people in this little space. It's going to be a challenging mitzvah to perform. So even though, there are going to be too many people there, it's going to be too much traffic, it's going to be too crowded, everybody has to put up their best to try to get there, to do everything they can to get there, to fulfill this mitzvah. Moshe commands them. If Moshe was only talking to the Kohanim and the Zekanim, how can we say that it says Tikra? You in the singular should read it then. Who is going to be reading? Ela Otam, but Otam includes Gam al Yehoshua. It also includes Yoshua, the Gama Kohanim, and therefore, since it includes Yoshua and Kohanim, he's talking to the Kohanim. Everybody has to help gather the people together, but Yoshua is the one who is going to do the reading, or the Melech, whoever it is. Okay. Tikra, we're going to see later on, it says Tikra, you in the singular shall read Lashon Yachid. Muvan shediber b'Yehoshua. It's talking about Yoshua is the one who's going to read this parsha. However, Sheyamelech, because he was obviously he's the king, and the king is the one who's in charge. And this teaches us the fact that it's the reading you shall read in the singular teaches us that it's the command of the king to do the reading. Amnam, however, Lav Davka Melech Mamash. He doesn't have to be somebody who is called king, who has the title of king. Ela Hagadol Shebe Yisrael. Whoever is the greatest. I don't know whether that means politically or it means the Talmud Chacham of the Dor. Don't know. But it seems that as it's applied historically, it's the political leader of Am Yisrael is the one who was appointed to read this. However, Nitziv says, that's why I would have translated Gadol Sh'Yisrael. Nitziv says, no. When there was no kingdom, when there was no king, in other words, basically most of Bayit Sheni, Hayah HaGadol Kohen Gadol. It was read by the Kohen Gadol because he was the most, I guess, the most prominent officer, Jewish officer. And that is why the Kohanim are included in this whole general order, according to the Tziv. When there is a leader, a singular leader who is leading Am Yisrael, he is the one who is charged, as we find in the days of Yoshua. Again, one last thing I wanted to go through is Bi'aznehem. Very interesting thought. The Netziv says, again, the concept of Bi'aznehem, as we just said, that it has to go into their ears. Shikanes Bi'aznehem ma sheshomim. That they should, what they are hearing, they should absorb it, not just go in one ear and out the other. Shehema mechuyavim latot ozen ulahavin. They are obligated, in order, everybody who comes has to try their best to hear, to listen, to understand, not just to hear, and so that they'll say, yeah, I heard what he said, but completely forgot what he said. You have to internalize it. Afilu chachamim gedolim, even those who already know it all, they've learned it all, still have to listen, as the Rambam says in Laws of Chagiga, that everybody has to come and listen. Uleman yomedu, in order they should learn hadinim, the laws, malachot, shenishnu b'torah shebichtav. That they have to realize that even though they may spend all year long studying Torah Sheba'al Peh, you have to have your Torah Sheba'al Peh has its basis in Torah Shebichtav. That they have to be able to trace it back to the Torah Shebichtav, to where they started, and therefore they have to listen and understand the halachot as they're taught in the Torah, so that they can then understand the derivations thereof. I realize my time is up, so we're going to stop here. But again, I wanted just to say one last thought. The whole concept of the Hakhel, and it's what the Netziv ends with, is hatoelet shel hakriyah b'makom hanivchar. This purpose of reading the Torah in the place Hashem has chosen, in the Beit HaMikdash, Eino Magia, is only achievable Elakol Zman Shehema B'Eretz Yisrael V'lo K'Shehema B'Chul. It's only achievable when they are in Eretz Yisrael. We cannot achieve a mitzvah Hakhel, and even if somebody tells you, "Oh, we're going to a Hakhel in Madison Square Garden," it's not. Maybe it's a Zecher Hakhel. We're doing something to try to remember Hakhel, but again, the real Hakhel can only happen A, when there is a Beit HaMikdash, B, when we are living in Eretz Yisrael and we are coming to Ola Regel, not when we're in Chutz La'aretz. I think the whole concept here of Hakhel is educational in purpose, but it's not just that. It's also the experiential. Yes, you have to sit and listen, but the experience of seeing all of the Jews together, all of Am Yisrael coming together joyously for a Chag to celebrate. Because unfortunately, if you look historically and you look at today, the only time we come together in that kind of groups is to protest the government's doing something wrong, or Rahman Litzlan, we've lost somebody of major stature has passed away. The point of Hakhel is get everybody together for a positive reason, not to complain about something, not to say goodbye to something. Although I don't want to say that going to a levaya for a gadol is not important. It's very important. But unfortunately, we should be realizing that the Jewish world has to get together, not just physically, but this is symbolically of Jews being on the same page. We have to all be on the same page. That we have to be following the mitzvot of the Torah. We have to be living in Eretz Yisrael. We have to be building a society that's dedicated to the values of Torah. And that's how we will ultimately get back to be able to perform these mitzvot, because we are showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu that, yes, we are ready to get back together, to be an Am Echad in a way that we can be an Or LaGoyim. And when we're able to fulfill that mission, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will hear our tefillot and will move us forward to the Gula Shlem of Mehera B'Yameinu. Thank you all. I open it up for questions, comments, or feedback. Rita, go ahead. Go ahead. Rita's question: if the Torah tells us this is the way that Eretz Yisrael is supposed to run, why do we have so many political challenges? Because unfortunately, we live in a society today that does not accept the fact that the Torah, that many of the people in this society, not many, there are people in the society that do not accept the Torah as their guide to life, much less their guide to the political system. And we have to understand that the people who started this country and the modern state of Israel were not generally religious. They may very well have had traditional educations, and many came from traditional families, but the founders, many of the founders of the political entity we call Medinat Yisrael, were either apathetic toward religion or anti-religious. And they set up institutions that that don't necessarily follow Torah law. Many institutions they inherited from the Turks or the Brits or other wonderful political systems, and they put together a system that again, off the record, that in my opinion is the worst political entity you can imagine. I think even a monarchy would be better. Okay, yes, it is some form. It does have. There are some freedoms granted to the people. I will grant you that. Yes, we have a right to vote, but we don't have a right to vote. But that's a whole different discussion. But clearly, our goal and the goal of the Jewish people is to build a society based on the Torah. Unfortunately, when we study Jewish history, we find that when we were in Eretz Yisrael, we were not too successful at that. And there's no reason to believe that overnight that's going to change. It's a gradual process. And a part of it is the demographic process of the fact that as more and more people are born in observant families, we get a larger percentage of the population that is observant, but we still have a significant percentage of the population that is either not yet observant or anti-observant. And that makes it very difficult to establish a political system based on the Torah. Does that answer your question? Does that help you? You're still perplexed? Oh, no. The judicial system of Eretz Yisrael is not in any shape, manner, or form necessarily based on the Torah's system of justice. Again, as I said, there are smatterings from Turkish law, there are smatterings from British law, there are smatterings from Russian law, and you also have to understand that the founders were not looking to found a capitalist democracy. They were looking to form a socialist society. And there are a lot of the laws that are socialist, still have socialist basis in them. So it's as I say, it's the worst of all worlds. It's my personal opinion that we got the worst political system of all here. But ultimately, it will we'll get our act together. I got to believe that, but it will take time. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, everyone have a good rest of the week. Laila Tov, thank you for joining. And Bezrat Hashem, we will see you all next week.
Thank you, Aaron.
Laila Tov.
Thank you, Aaron.
Laila Tov to all.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.